Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Terrier Talk, and it's actually the first in a little series of 4 that will come to you over the next few weeks, in which I'm going to try and talk through some dog training industry trends, some of which have been really good, some of which haven't been so good for dogs, and what is essentially like trying to look a little bit past what is, in my opinion, good marketing as opposed to what is in reality good dog training, and like how you as a pet dog owner can navigate that, because you will inevitably see the people who are better at marketing. That's just the nature of the beast, these days, the way we see things. You've probably come to listening to this through exposure to my social media, and that has been put in front of you, for reasons of that it's the right kind of content for you. It's the sort of thing that you watch, and it's done well from a marketing point of view. So it's like you will end up in an echo chamber of similar market ideas that you watch, and that can be good. It can also be really bad, and like how those dog training industry marketing trends have kind of affected people's opinions on how we deal with dogs. So the first one that I want to go over is what has been really an overwhelmingly positive trend, I think, in terms of like there's lots of dog trainers that pick on this now. There's one or two accounts, one in particular that I can think of, that really pushes this as an idea and bases their entire marketing strategy off it, and is very successful with that. And that is that meeting your dog's needs, and by that I most specifically mean their breed-specific needs, is going to be the key to changing your dog's behaviour problems, right? Now, this is something that you will hear me say a lot. I will say you need to tick the boxes for your terrier, in terms of their needs for being a terrier. So, I always talk about play and getting them to do things like tug, making sure they get enough relevant exercise. For me, one of the big things for terriers is giving them independence, or, facilitating their independence, so they're able to make decisions by themselves and, kind of run their own lives to a certain extent. And how doing that will solve your dog's behaviour problems. Now, I think that it is massively, massively important that we do this, right? That we look at our dog's needs we look at our dog, essentially, our terriers, from a holistic point of view, that we look at them and we go, okay, this dog isn't just the training that I've given them, okay? They are their genetics, they are their lifestyle that they lead, they are the experiences that they've had. There's a really good dog trainer who you as a pet dog owner probably won't have heard of, called Kim Brophy. She's a dog trainer's dog trainer, if that makes sense. And she has a theory called Legs, which is all about this. It's about the lifestyle of the dog and the genetics of the dog, and how that actually, all of that kind of goes together to make the dog that you have. Yeah. And it kind of like putting aside the old school idea that probably I very much thought when I first got a dog, was that if you just do a good job of training that dog, then you are sorted. It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter where they come from. All you've got to do is train them, and then boom, you will have the dog that you wanted. And if you haven't got the dog that you wanted, or if you don't have a well-behaved dog, then you failed somehow in training, and this kind of like meeting your dog's needs sort of marketing trend and push within the dog training industry has counteracted that, and it's great. It's like overwhelmingly positive. Any good dog trainer does this. Any good dog trainer does this. Any good dog trainer starts here, right? Like the reactivity course that's on the go at the moment and will soon be available for everybody to buy. It's where it starts. In fact, the majority of the course is about this. It's about building relationship and building motivation and getting the dog's needs met and all that sort of stuff. And then once we've got that foundation, then we start to add in the training on top. And then the training actually works. But what is slightly dangerous about some of this is that, thanks to, I think, social media marketing and the kind of the the real split in dog training between kind of like, you know, people who do and don't use corrections and consequences in dog training. It has been pushed to a lot of people that all they need to do is meet their dog's needs, right? And if they meet their dog's needs, then they won't have any behaviour problems. And that is just not true. Or they won't have any, I say behaviour problems, and I think what I actually mean is they won't have any behaviour, or they won't have to deal with any behaviours that they don't want, right? And like one of the ones I hear all the time is this particular dog trainer who markets this, and he says, you know, like, the reason you don't have recall is because you're not meeting your dog's needs. And he shows his dog who's a high, you know, what you would call a high kind of prey drive breed that, you know, traditionally a lot of that type of breed wouldn't be let off the lead because they're a hunting type dog. You know, and he's got it off the lead, and he shows himself like calling that dog off, you know, like chases and whatnot. But he also talks about how that dog has caught multiple animals. He actively encourages them to do things like chase squirrels and all that kind of stuff. So in his, you know, he says, you know, I'm letting my dog go off and do the exploring and all that sort of stuff, and therefore I can recall them, right? Now, that is probably true. That is, I don't deny that he's fine, and that his particular dog, he has achieved that, you know, by allowing that dog basically as much freedom as it wants, you know, and he will readily admit that the dog has caught wildlife and all that sort of stuff. And I'm not, you know, having a go at him from that point of view. Mine have caught wildlife before. Is that, you know, that therefore he can kind of recall that dog whenever he wants to, and that might well have worked for him. But it's not necessarily going to work for every single dog. You know, especially a very independent, very high working drive type dog, which is what you have in a lot of terriers, okay? And you could, you know, take your terrier out, do flirt pole with it every single day, take it to barn hunt, you know, do all the things that you as a pet dog owner, you do scent work sessions with them every day, give them tons of exercise, all of that stuff that you as a pet dog owner are able to have access to. You know, like, you don't, let's be honest, you don't necessarily have access to or want to take part in the dog's real working role. You know, you're not necessarily, you know, joining your local rat pack and, you know, taking your dog to do that twice a week. You know, so we've got, within the bounds of reality, you are doing probably as much as you can to meet that dog's needs, and, you know, realistically putting a lot of time and effort into it. You know, you genuinely are giving this dog an absolutely fantastic life. And then all of a sudden, the marketing will tell you that you will then be able to achieve recall. You will then be able to achieve the dog not being reactive. You will then be able to achieve the dog not being excited about seeing other dogs. And that, in my personal experience, is not the case. A simple way to liken it will be, you know, I can eat a meal and be completely full and still eat a bar of chocolate after it, right? Because I really like eating a bar of chocolate. And the similar situation is true with a dog who gets internal rewards from the quote-unquote problem behaviour, which we've always got to remember is not a problem behaviour for the dog, but is a problem behaviour for us as people. E.g., you meet all of your dog's needs, you give them outlet for their aggressive tendencies, etc., etc. That dog isn't necessarily not going to bark at another dog if it finds that very internally rewarding. It might still continue to do that. That dog is not necessarily not going to chase a deer or a rabbit or whatever because you've played flirt pole with it that day. In theory, you've met that dog's need for chase, right? You know, they've had a good chase that day. They shouldn't really need to do any more chasing. Doesn't mean they won't if that opportunity arises, because we've bred these dogs to just keep going, right? Just do more. That's everything of their genetics tells them that. They will just keep going. You give them more to chase, they'll chase it. You put another chase opportunity in front of them after you put a real life chase opportunity in front of them, even after you've spent all morning playing like chase with them yourself, they'll still chase it. Okay? So what is important to understand isn't that meeting that dog's needs will magically reduce your like unwanted behaviours. What is important to understand is that meeting that dog's needs will allow you to put obedience in place that actually works, right? And that obedience can come in different forms, but you cannot expect, like a dog that is desperate to chase things to listen to you when they haven't had an opportunity to do that day or that week or whatever. I try not to think of it as a daily thing, more as like just a whole life picture that they get to do this kind of thing. But that's the important part. Yeah, so like a lot of the marketing of that account and other accounts that I've seen, big accounts that really push this as a narrative, and it is massively important. Like, I'm not taking away from it, and I agree with the large majority of what these accounts say. You need to be doing all these things, and yes, you absolutely do. I think it just misses a really, really important part of the piece or the puzzle for dogs that are pretty much insatiable in terms of their drive, is that you then need to lay obedience on top of that if you genuinely want to have a dog that is in control and living in a pet lifestyle. Like, it's okay if you live somewhere where you've got acres of space and you can go for a walk with your dog and then you can just let them run after things, and because they're not desperate, they do come back. Like, I can do that here in the Scottish Borders, really. I can find spaces where I could just take the dogs, I could let them run off chasing after stuff, knowing full well they'll be back in 5 or 6 minutes, and it's not a problem. I could do that. But then that restricts them in so many other ways, because then I can't take them to certain locations. I can't, I can't take them to places where that isn't possible, because they're so used to doing those things and living that lifestyle of basically getting free choice, that when you then have to say to them, no, you can't do this, they don't have the ability to cope with that. So there has to be a balance between a dog that's, meeting its needs, or you're meeting your dog's needs, but you also have to lay obedience on top. Meeting the needs isn't necessarily a magical fix-all cure for some behaviour issues. Some behaviour issues are motivated in very different ways, and that just isn't always the answer. It's important. It's really important, but don't fall into the trap of thinking that that's all you need to do, because it's a lovely way to think about it. It's very appealing to people, to think that that's all you need to do. You need to just do all these lovely things for your dog, and then all of your magical, all of your problems will kind of magically disappear. Like it appeals to a certain sort of person who really, really wants to just do great things for their dog, and that's like highly commendable. But ultimately, some behaviour issues, particularly with terrier type dogs, it just won't fix it. You will have to go into a level of obedience over and above that in order to get a dog that is safe and suitable and successful as a pet, which is ultimately what you're looking for, especially because you are not a dog trainer, and most of us as dog trainers have the ability to give our dogs over and above the things that other, like people working 9-to-5 jobs don't, because we can take them everywhere with us. We've got a bit of extra time in our days to train with them, all that sort of stuff, so we are able to really give our dogs that extra bit of something that, maybe as a 9-to-5 working ordinary dog owner you can't. So you have to have a balance of the two. So that's my chat for today. It's definitely a big trend in the dog training industry, and it's a massively, massively positive one, because it really does lift that guilt that goes along with, like, this feeling that if you've failed as a dog owner, because you haven't. If your dog's got behaviour issues, there are so many factors that go into it. It's not just the training that you did. Okay, there's all of the things that mixed up in that pot of their life that caused it, a lot of which you have no control over. So it really opens that up and changes that attitude, which is fantastic. But in my opinion, it's gone too far, almost as a marketing trend in some places, where it will say that you don't need to do any obedience, and obedience is irrelevant, and if you just do all these lovely things for your dog, that will solve all the problems, and that just isn't the case. I've got dogs who have got their needs met well and above, like what most people would be able to achieve, never mind what the dog actually needs, and yet they will still perform behaviours that are, in theory, problem behaviours to me, given the opportunity. So it's really not always that simple. So, hope that made sense. And we're going to look at the trend next episode, that every reactive dog is fearful. Because this one is a trend I'm not keen on, but it's been a trend that's been around for a couple of years. So we're going to talk about that one next time. So I look forward to seeing you then.